Hello everyone and welcome to another game from the TCEC, the Top Chess Engine Competition Superfinal. It's again Allie Stein versus Stockfish, and we said that we were going to cover another game where perhaps the result will be a bit different than in the previous game, but maybe it won't, so we'll just have to wait and see. So here Allie has the white pieces, and let's just check out the game. So we have e4, e6 by Stockfish, the French defense, and no, I did not choose this game just because black goes for the French defense. Here we have d4, d5, and knight to c3. So pretty standard stuff. Knight to f6, and now e5, advancing the pawn, the Steinitz variation. We have knight back to d7 and f4 now, cementing his pawn, as of course white is expecting an attack on the center with c5, which is what black plays. Knight f3, defending d4, also developing. Knight to c6, increasing the pressure on d4. Bishop to e3, adding yet another defender while developing. And now once black trades with c captures on d4, knight captures, and bishop to c5. Queen to d2, and here black just castles. You have to be careful about going something like queen to b6. It does seem like it increases the pressure even further, but here white has the very tricky knight to a4 move, which attacks both the queen and the bishop. And now if queen b4, you just trade, captures, captures. For example, king captures here, and now knight recaptures on c5. And you don't win a piece with knight captures on c6, while you do open up a discovery here, because black has this in-between check, and only then black will recapture the piece. So you have to be careful about things like that. But okay, even if you don't capture on c6, you can play a4, and you will have a slightly better position. You still have the bishop pair, and the position is perfectly fine. So black instead just castles, still decides what to do with the queen, and we have queenside castle by Allie. And now again we have opposite sides castles, and it's going to be a race. White will attack on the king side, and the black will try to attack on the queen side. We have a6 preparing b5 and b4, and knight to b3 now, attacking the bishop while offering a trade on e3. So black decides that the bishop will still be a useful piece, retreats it. We have not there, obviously. Bishop back to e7, and now h4, preparing h5 and h6. Now this has all been played before, even in human chess. We have b5 by black, preparing b4, also wanting to trade off some pieces. This knight can come to e5 and then to c4, also a pretty often idea. With h5, and now there is one game that reached this position from 2006, Markus Rager versus Viktor Erdos, where b4 was played right away. But here we have knight to a5, and this is now a new move in the position. So as of move 13, we have a completely new game. So let's see what happens next. With h6, you want to push that pawn all the way, create some dark square weaknesses. We have g6 by black, and now king to b5, king to b1. Just a nice prophylactic move. Long time ago, grandmasters agreed that this was always a good idea. Not only as black has a semi-open c file for the rook, but also black still has the dark square bishop. So if the position opens up, you can always find yourself on the wrong side of some tricky ideas. So it's best just play it right away. King to b1. Knight to c4. Now either you will allow black to have this monster knight on c4, or you will eliminate it. Almost always white eliminates it. So bishop captures on c4, d captures on c4 now, and now as the knight is under attack, knight to d4. With b4, further pushing on the queen side, and knight to e4, and now c3. So already we can see that Stockfish is on the attack. With queen to d3, and now comes queen to c7. There's no point in capturing. You can always do this, and you can be pretty sure that white will never recapture. Or play b3, it would be pretty bad. Then you can just create some very nasty ideas. So knight to d6 by Allie. And now what's the idea behind knight to d6? Well, now white has a monster knight, and if you can remove it, it would be great, but you can't. For example, if bishop captures, pawn captures, and now queen captures, you have the problem of knight to f5, offering a queen trade. And now if queen captures on d3, which is pretty much your only good option, first you're going to play knight to e7 check. King to h8, only move, and now rook captures on d3. And here you cannot prevent both threats of knight captures on c8, followed by rook captures on d7, and also the threat of bishop d4, which would result either in a mating attack or severe material loss for black. So you have to prevent bishop to d4, and now it's just winning a piece. Knight captures, rook captures, and the rook captures on d7, winning for white. So after this, for example, like we said, if you capture on d6, captures, and now you don't capture, let's say you go queen to b7, still doesn't help you all that much, because now this by capturing on d6, white opened up this diagonal, and it's just much better for white. You can even play captures, captures, knight b3, you block the attack, and now black is gonna have pretty much an impossible task defending the position along the dark squares. You don't even have time to start your own attack on the queen side. So okay, after knight to d6, of course Stockfish does not allow such a position to arise, rather c captures on b2 now. And now comes queen to e4, going after the rook on a8, but it's very hard to decide what to do with the rook. For example, if you move it to a7, you go under the mask of the bishops. You don't want to allow something like that. If you go to b8, you allow knight to c6. And now you either lose the bishop here with check, or if you want to defend it somehow, well, not there, but like move it, then you have to give up the exchange on b8. So here we have knight to b6, just defending that rook on a8, but this allows white a very interesting combination. So feel free to pause the video here and try to find this sneaky idea white played in this position, while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on going forward with the knight. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's knight d to b5. It's a very tricky idea where you offer a knight, the queen is under attack, and black doesn't have a better move other than capturing the knight, because whatever you play, bishop captures on b6 is coming, and that removes the defender of the rook on a8. So here, Stockfish captured the knight with a captures on b5, bishop captures on b6. Now, of course, you cannot capture because queen captures rook. So queen to b8, getting the queen out of the way, and now bishop back to c5, just cementing that knight over there, and also preparing bishop captures on b4, which is very important. Once the bishop gets this b4 square, then you can just play a3, and you're perfectly safe on the queen side. Here, Stockfish continues, bishop to d7, you want to get the other rook into the game as well. Bishop captures on b4 as we planned, and now rook to a6. We have rook to h3, a very nice rook lift. From here, this rook can join as just doubling up the rooks along the d file, but also it will help out with the defense of the queen side. Once this pawn comes to a3, it will just be an additional defender to the queen side pawns. And now it's not easy for black to continue this attack. Like we said, any threats along the a file will just be met with a3. There's nothing to look for there. So here Stockfish offers a queen trade, and Allie accepts. With queen captures, this allows the other rook to go here, create some threats along the a file, but now just a3, and you are perfectly safe here. With bishop to c6, Stockfish now activates the bishop on this beautiful diagonal, but now g4. And now, as you don't want to wait for white to complete the setup of his pieces to get his rook to d3 to push maybe f5 here to bust open the king side, here Stockfish plays f6. And okay, with e captures on f6, now this bishop also gets this beautiful diagonal, and now rook to e3, going after the e6 pawn. Bishop to d5 defending, and now g5, first pushing the bishop back with bishop to h8, and now rook back to d3. And here, rook to a4. Stockfish now creates a threat. For example, if white makes a silly move, something like rook to e1, just waiting to see what happens, then the threat was rook captures on b4. Just, for example, pawn captures, rook a1 is mate because the b2 pawn is defended. So here we have c3, now making sure that if captures, then the c pawn can capture back, and now rook to d8 by Stockfish. So what do you play here? The problem with capturing on b5 is bishop c4, not something, well, not immediately, as now the rook is on d8, but in most of the lines you will not be able to capture it due to this bishop to c4 idea. Here, if you capture it, it's okay, white can go after this pawn, but now bishop to e4 pins it, as the king is still on b1, so that's the idea here. After this rook to d8 move, you can't go after the pawn right away. We have knight to b7 now. A very interesting idea, kicking the rook away from the d8 square, and also you cannot capture it because of rook captures rook. So here, rook to c8, getting the rook out of the attack, and now king captures on b2. So not really getting rid of the pawn. That pawn wasn't doing all that much, but you no longer have your king on b1, so it will not be able to be under attack. Now we have rook back to a8, now getting this rook just to a8, and now knight back to d6, attacking this rook once again. And now black really has problems. Now the king is on b2, and there is no bishop to e4 to win the exchange here. So how do you prevent knight captures on b5? Well, other than just moving the rook. For example, if rook to d8, then you can capture it. Knight captures on b5, and you don't have bishop to c4, as your rook would be hanging on d8. So that's a problem. On the other hand, if you play something like rook c to b8, now you're no longer here, but now you have different problems. White will now just waste the move here, rook to d2, and now you still have to play something. You can't go to the d file. We already said that. All of these squares are covered by the knight. f8 is going under the mask of the bishop. So here you have to play something like rook to a7, but now white's idea is f5, and f5 is just extremely strong. You cannot recapture with this because the bishop falls, so you'd have to play g captures, and now knight captures on f5, for example, captures, and here we have just a position where white is up a pawn, but in a much more active position with better pieces, and this will be winning for white, especially when an engine plays this endgame. And lastly, but not leastly, after this idea of attacking the rook, if you play something like rook to c7, it's the same. White will just waste a move, rook 1d2, force black to move something, and after rook c to a7, for example, as now these squares are covered by the knight, again you play f5, and it's pretty much the same endgame. Captures, and white will be able to prevail here. So after knight to d6, we have rook to f8. Out of the four evils, choose the lesser one, but there is no lesser evil here, as you will lose another pawn. So knight captures on b5, but even in your own games, before you capture a pawn, you have to check all of the possibilities. So the rook is now under attack. You don't have time for something like this. Rook back to c8, and now just knight back to d6. So you retrieved with the knight to this very nice square, while now being up 2 pawns. So rook to f8 once again. We have knight to b5 repeating once. This is now move 40. I don't know if they reach time control. I'm not sure about that, as I didn't read it, but seems like a reasonable thing to do, as there's a repetition of moves, so maybe they do have time control, but I can't confirm that. Rook f back to c8, and now as Allie is up 2 pawns, not interested in a draw, we have knight back to d4. Now you have to find another really active square for this knight, and also there is the point of the weak e6 pawn, so there's that. So king to f7. Knight to c2 now, bishop to c6, and now comes knight to e3. With bishop to b5, attacking the rook, rook to d6, and now comes bishop to a4, attacking the other rook. Rook to d3, and now rook to e8, just waiting to see what white will do. Knight to g4, now again remaneuvering the knight, king back to g8, and now knight to e5. With bishop back to b5, attacking the rook, rook to d4. Now both rooks are on dark squares, and all of your other pieces are on dark squares, so you don't have to worry about this light square bishop annoying you. Bishop to a4, and now finally c4, starting to push the passed pawn. And now we have to ask ourselves, can you eliminate the knight here? Your bishop is pretty useless on h8. I mean, it's on a lovely diagonal, but with the knight on e5, it's a dark square. You don't really... there's no way that knight is ever moving. So we have to check, is it possible to remove it? F captures, and now, for example, rook to a7, but you will win the e6 pawn. Rook f4, you're planning rook to f6 and just pick up the pawn, and if rook to f7, you still play rook to f6, and if white doesn't want to allow this capture, you will have to capture, but now this is completely winning for white. You're just gonna move the rook to the 7th rank, control the 7th rank, push f7, for example, and that's just it. So here, after c4, we have rook e to b8, just trying something, waiting for white to make a move, and rook captures on e6. As we already seen, there was no way of guarding this pawn. We have rook to a7 and now king to c3, getting the king to a safer square. Rook to c8 and now king to d3. We have rook to that's the other rook to b8 and now rook to d5. We have rook back to c8 and now rook e to d6, doubling up on the d file, rook to e8 and now rook to b6. We have rook to c7 and now bishop to d6, so taking away almost all of the squares from black's pieces. We have rook back to a7 and now you could push c5 right away, but Allie wants to keep everything in order, plays king to d2. King to d2 probably with the idea if you push c5 right away, there's bishop d1 maybe, opening up a discovered attack to the rook here. By playing king to d2, this bishop has no squares, so none of the squares this bishop can use are available, as now the king covers both c2 and the d1, so this bishop is now a very sad bishop. Again, this is no way to treat your bishop. So we have rook to c8, now comes rook to d3 first before pushing the c-pawn. Again, probably just further improving the position before deciding to push. This is just extreme preparation before you go for the pawn push. Rook c back to a8, and now comes finally c5. With bishop captures on e5, black cannot afford to wait any longer. Bishop captures on e5, and now rook to c8. And after playing rook to c8, it was in this position that Stockfish resigned the game, or as we like to remind ourselves, both engines agreed that the evaluation is more than -10. And the game just ended. So you're up 3 pawns here. There's no real way of black to even play this. Even you would win this against Stockfish. There's no no question about it. But there's even no threat of capturing the c5 pawn. You can just play something like rook d6, and if the pawn is captured, you just win the game on the spot. Rook b8 check, king f7, rook f6 check, king has to move, and now bishop d6 will win that sad rook that captured the pawn. So nothing to be done there. So after rook to c8, the game ended on move 60, and a very nice victory for this new neural network engine, Allie Stein. So yeah, like I said, I will put 2 links in the description below. One will be where you will be able to follow this 100 games match contest between the 2 of them, and the other will be if you want to read a bit more about Allie Stein, about the creators, about just everything you can read about this new neural network engine. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Georg Brandschmidt, Alan Wang, Kathleen Northrop, Taras Karpiak, and Ren Yulu, if my translator is not deceiving me, for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Still continuing to check up on your suggestions, waiting for my book to arrive so we can finish off the Capablanca saga conclusion. And I have some interesting stuff prepared for you, so hope you will enjoy that as well. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.